been wanting to read Candice Carty Williams' Queenie for ages. I've actually had this book for nearly a year. The reason I bought it was because of this beautiful cover. It just completely stood out at the bookstore, and then it made me pick it up and I read the back of it and it sounded really interesting, and it's supposed to be a bit of a comedy, and I've been meaning to read it. And life has just repeatedly got in the way, and a reading slump got in the way. But finally, recently, I finished it, and now I'm here to review it about 3 weeks after I finished it, but better late than never. So our primary character, Queenie, is a British Jamaican woman in her mid-20s who is living in London and struggling to come to terms with the demise of an interracial relationship. Queenie's life spirals out of control as she waits for Tom, refusing to acknowledge the obvious and also refusing to acknowledge her self-destructive behavior. She doesn't seem to connect the dots between her self-destructive behavior and the position she finds herself in and the demise of her relationship. Queenie's family dynamics are complicated, and she struggles to find a place that she fits within that family and trying to feel comfortable within her family. It's the same for her work situation, except that she's in a predominantly white workplace, and so she's also dealing with elements of sexism and racism that are rife in this workplace. At the same time she's trying to navigate this and a breakup, Queenie is hitting that self-destructive button as hard as she possibly can and as often as she possibly can. She is having regular casual sex encounters, which is fine, but she's having unprotected sex with people that she doesn't even like, that don't treat her well, and that quite honestly are borderline abusive, if not totally abusive. And so Queenie kind of continues from there, and it's really about whether she's going to be able to correct the ship or if she's going to continue going down a very self-destructive pathway, and kind of how that all plays out and how she gets to the end point of her character arc. The thing that I'm confused about is why this was being promoted as kind of the new Bridget Jones. Sure, it has a more diverse cast and it has casual sex and a lot of banter and drunken behavior with friends, and I kind of get that, but I feel like Bridget Jones is a little bit more casual comedic, and I didn't find this that funny. And the guys in Bridget Jones, while you look at Daniel Cleaver and he's undesirable, you can kind of see why Bridget goes down that pathway, and it is kind of amusing to watch, and you can kind of see why she's initially repelled by Mark. But with Queenie, that's not the case. You can't really ever kind of see why she's going for these guys. So I guess really, if you're looking at Queenie to be your new Bridget Jones, just know that there are only wisps of Bridget Jones-ness in it. Queenie goes on a very real journey. At some point in all of our lives, we have been self-destructive and done things that are things we wish we could forget. And you basically have to come to terms with those, or at least acknowledge their existence, in order to find some self-esteem. And that's kind of where Queenie is going, and it's kind of the journey she's got to go on to become a happier individual than the Queenie we find in this book. There were things I really liked about Queenie. There were references to sexism and Black Lives Matter, and kind of the way sexism and racism is just casually in our everyday lives. And I thought that was done really well, and I thought it was handled really well without being preachy at all. And I think that that's important to see more of that in books, so I really like that. It was also a smooth story. It was well written, it was easy to read, it was a look into complicated relationships, both domestic and familial and workplace, and I think, you know, that's something that we can all relate to, and it is something that is a very common issue, to have problems and complications with relationships in all fields of your life. The part of that though that I really enjoyed was seeing how kind of cultural differences and race played into those relationships. So like in terms of domestic partnerships, looking at interracial relationships and how that kind of really affects a relationship and how I don't want to call them microaggressions because they felt really aggressive, but like everyday racism can just leach into a relationship, and the white person is just kind of like, what? I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. It's like, yeah, you did. I also liked the depiction of mental health and the way that that can kind of influence the relationships you choose, and that you sometimes seek relationships that confirm how you feel about yourself. The last thing I really liked is that there is an exploration of trauma that is done in a lighthearted way. It is at times a little bit casual, but I think that that is important to acknowledge in books and important to see in books, and I like that it was included. Things that I didn't like. I didn't like how Queenie was portrayed as lazy and promiscuous and broke. It felt a little bit stereotypical at times. And I didn't like the way she just accepted blatant racism and sexism that was just pushed on her regularly. And I can understand that that would be very awful to deal with on a regular basis, and that it would be tiring to repeatedly address it. But she just takes it, and I wanted her to fight back a little bit more, and she just doesn't. I felt like there were a lot of stereotypical characters in this book. There was the bonehead guys that she picked up, and I mean, I don't doubt their realism. I've met these men, but it just felt like there was a lot of stereotypical characters and not as many that were different as I would like to see. I really enjoyed the time we spent with Queenie's family. I thought that was really interesting, but I kind of felt like the time she spent at work and in her social life was with characters that could have had more flavor. I don't doubt the realism of it, and that these people exist, and particularly these men exist, because we all know that they do. We've all met them and we've all spent time with them. But where it was problematic for me was that, I mean, I can kind of see how if you're in a self-destructive pathway and you have very limited self-esteem, how you would end up in this situation with these men or these other friend characters who needed to get cut. But I mean, she just took it. There was blatant issues being shoved in her face, and she just took it and was almost like she was trying to convince herself that she liked it. And yet we saw in the book that she's very aware of racial stereotypes and when it's happening, and is capable of confronting it. And as I said, I'm sure it's exhausting to have to confront it all the time, and she shouldn't have to. It shouldn't be there. But it just felt like she took a lot of it, and it just made me uncomfortable. But you know, maybe that's the point. Maybe I'm supposed to feel uncomfortable with it and realize how much is directed at people of color on a daily basis, and how much that shit would just wear you down. But the trouble is, it stopped me from really emotionally attaching to Queenie. I liked her and I was fascinated by her story, but I would have adored her if there was a bit more fight. Another reason why I found that problematic is because it just felt like I was being shown so much of Queenie's self-destructive side and of her low self-esteem that I didn't really get to see enough of her other redeeming qualities, and I wasn't given really enough of a chance to fall in love with her. And in the end, it just kind of felt like we were lurching from one disaster to another, and it felt like her employment situation dragged out for way too long and was kind of unrealistic, and then just was resolved. I guess for me, that conflict was just tidied up too quickly and too neatly that then I was like, well, so why did it take so long to get to that point? Because everyone knew. And I liked Queenie's character arc because self-development takes time, but I just felt like her character arc ended prematurely. Generally, I liked Queenie's character arc, and I feel like when you read a book, you're kind of watching a character go from here to here, right? And Queenie goes 75% of the way, and then the book ends, and it's kind of unsatisfying because you want that last little bit, and you know that it's going to go there. You're left with no doubt that we're going to go there. You just don't see it. And so I don't know, I just felt a little unsatisfied. I wanted to see her get to a place where she wasn't a mess or a shell of herself. I wanted to see her come to a place of vibrancy or a place of resolution, and we were almost there. Just didn't quite get there. I mean, generally I did like this book. I would give it about 3.5 out of 5. But it was sold as the British Book Awards Book of 2020. And I'm not sure that it deserves that. The problem for me is a little bit about how it was sold and my expectations. I kind of expected a character with more conviction and just a more complete character arc. And I just expected something a little deeper, and then when it's sold as a new Bridget Jones diary, I guess I expected it to be funnier, and it wasn't. And so I was in this place where it wasn't living up to expectations, and then you add what felt to me like an incomplete character arc, and I kind of walk away from this book unsatisfied but glad I read it. I hope you've enjoyed this review of Candice Carty Williams' Queenie. If you've read it, let me know below in the comment section what you thought of it and whether you had the same issues with it as I did, or whether you just straight up loved the book of 2020 according to British Book Awards. Don't forget to like this video and to subscribe to my channel. It really helps my channel grow and I would really appreciate it. If you would like to check out some of my work, you can either check me out on Instagram and Twitter at Pip Coombs, or my books The Hunted and A Night Rises, which are a YA book series. They are the first 2 books of a 6-part series. They're available in paperback and ebook format anywhere where books are sold, and they are about magic and witches and wizards, elves and werewolves, and a lot of other fun stuff. So if you enjoy YA, check them out.